I know that social media can be a mixed blessing, right? There are negatives to the world of social media, but there are really positives as well, I think. I think for me, one of the positives has been enabling me to listen to women. Um, I think of women friends I have on Facebook who have said things, particularly in moments like the Me Too moment a few years ago, where there were lots of women on Facebook speaking about their experiences of sexual harassment, of sexual assault, of sexual discrimination, and saying kind of things on Facebook that I don't think it would necessarily come up in a conversation in a normal sort of way. But in that world of social media, there was a sharing of kind of that experience that enabled someone like me as a man to listen and to hear and to understand more the experience of women. I say that as a kind of an introduction to this question of whether Jesus was sexist and racist. And I ask that question of whether Jesus was sexist and racist in the context, particularly of one story where he seems to be that, which is a story from the Gospel of Mark that is about an encounter he has with a woman. And this woman, we're told in the story, is Syrophoenician. She's a Gentile. She's of a different religion and race to Jesus as a Galilean Jew. And she has a daughter that she asks Jesus to heal. Jesus is a healer, however we understand that today, but that's what he did. And in the language of that day, it was also about possession by demons. So she says, "Will you heal my daughter of having a demon?" And Jesus says no. And not only does he say no, he says it in a particular way, kind of with a quote, a saying. You know, they say, "Don't throw what's meant for children to dogs." So he's really saying this is for my people, and he's really calling your people dogs, right? That's pretty harsh. That's pretty racist, right? And what do you call a female dog, right? So he says that to her. But she comes back at him. She doesn't accept that. She doesn't take no for an answer. She is a feisty mother and a feisty woman. And without directly challenging his language, she takes his language on his terms and goes, "Yeah, but maybe sometimes the food meant for the children is fed to the dogs." And Jesus goes, "Oh yeah, that's a good answer. Actually, I like that you challenged me." I think seems to be what he's saying. And he says, "Okay, in that case, I will heal your daughter. I've changed my mind." And so that's a kind of question where you go away from the story thinking, was that racist and sexist? And yes, it was. It was totally racist and sexist. But the story ends with Jesus listening. He hears something of the challenge given to him, even though it's kind of a gentle challenge in some ways, taking on his own language. And he changes his mind. He changes his mind. He listens to a woman, and that changes his mind and his actions. Sometimes men need to listen to women. Maybe a lot of the time, maybe all the time, men need to listen to women. But this is a very challenging story for Trinitarian Christians. Because if you're a Trinitarian Christian and you see Jesus as divine, as fully divine, and as therefore perhaps holding some of the characteristics of God, if Jesus is God, is Jesus this beautiful, divine, perfect being who is all good and all knowing and all wise? And then what do you do with a story like that? But the wonderful thing about being a Unitarian Christian who sees Jesus's identity as fully human and only human is that we as Unitarian Christians, those of us like me who follow a human Jesus, can say, here's an imperfect human being who got things wrong, who got something wrong, was wrong, and was, a bad person, did a bad thing in that sense, in that moment, was unkind, maybe. Maybe he was tired, he was having a bad day, and he was shaped by his society. He got something wrong, but he changed his mind. He was challenged and he changed his mind. And that actually, I think, is a better model than seeking to follow a totally saintly, holy person who always gets things right. I'm really glad that I follow an imperfect human being who sometimes got things wrong, because that feels like a better model for me to follow. It feels like a better model for me to follow as a man, to see a man who changes his mind and listens to women sometimes, maybe a little bit. Maybe it's not as much as it should be in Jesus, and maybe we don't know all the conversations because we don't have them. We just have what people wrote down. But what we have of what was written down, we do in this story see a man who was challenged and changed his mind. And I find that a better model of an imperfect man who tried to learn from his mistakes, than a perfect divine being. The Buddha said in the Dhammapada, all we are is the result of our thoughts, and all we do is the result of our mental states. And of course, our thoughts and our mental states are constructed by the society we live in. Everything that we think is not just, oh, I had an original thought, because that's not how it works. We're shaped by the society. And when we live in a sexist and a racist society, that shapes our thought process. That shapes some of the things we say. And that's not something to feel immense guilt over. Guilt is not really a good motivating way to deal with this, to say, oh, woe is me. What is the skillful thing to do is to recognize when that happens and to see the reality of it. And that's what spiritual practice is for. That's what meditation and contemplation enables us to do, is to just be more and more aware of our thought process, to sit in quiet. You begin to see your own thought process and begin to see what is not real about our thought process. We have these thoughts, we kind of build mental castles, mental walls in our minds. And spiritual practice is about gently dissolving those walls, those mental walls, through spiritual practice. Seeing what is real, getting closer to reality, closer to God, closer to our own souls, by seeing what is not real through these kind of mental constructions, which include things like racism and sexism. We can do that through spiritual practice and through being in the moment of listening to those who might challenge us, to hear the voice of God in our own soul, in our own conscience, and also when the voice of God speaks to us in people who might be different to us, in people who might challenge us, in people who might disagree with us, we can hear the voice of God speaking to us. Because the great piece of wisdom is always, don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think, because everything you think is made up of all kinds of nonsense, fear, anxiety, whatever kind of trauma, whatever you're holding from your journey through life, shapes that thought. And we can just take a moment to step back and go, oh, actually, that thing that I thought, that thing that I said, is it true and is it me? And I think in this story, we see Jesus doing this. So was Jesus sexist and racist? In this story, he absolutely was. He absolutely was. But that's not the point, because we all can be sexist and racist living in a sexist and racist society. The point is not what we are. The point is what we do with it. The point is, do we let ourselves be challenged? Do we let our thoughts come under scrutiny? Do we respond when someone challenges us? Do we know how to change our minds? We might be sexist, we might be racist, we might be imperfect human beings. That's okay. What matters is what we do with that in responding and being open and listening and changing.